Mother-in-law orders my husband to forget our daughter. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I heard my mother-in-law tell my husband to forget our daughter. Not me. Not our marriage. Our daughter. She said it in Vivian's low, polished voice, the one she used at charity lunches and school fundraisers when she wanted to sound gracious while quietly cutting somebody apart. Daniel, she said, you can still start over. She's 6. Children adapt. Forget the girl. End this cleanly and build a life that still makes sense. I was standing in Vivian's back hallway with a foil tray of sweet potatoes burning my fingers. Thanksgiving dinner was 10 minutes away. Sophie was in the den, coloring a turkey and waiting for her dad to admire it. I had walked away from the kitchen to find Daniel because Sophie had already asked twice, "Did Daddy see my feathers yet?" Then I heard his mother suggest he erase our child like she was a line on a whiteboard. I didn't walk in right away. I froze. That's the part I'm still ashamed of, even though my therapist later told me freezing is what people do when reality suddenly stops matching anything they thought was true. I stood there listening to the hum of Vivian's wine fridge and Daniel's breathing on the other side of the half-closed study door. He didn't say, "How dare you?" He didn't say, "Don't talk about my daughter like that." He said, after a long silence, "It's not that simple." I knew then that whatever I thought our marriage was, it was already cracking in places I hadn't seen. For context, I'm Olivia, 31, an elementary school librarian, keeper of overdue books and emergency granola bars. I'm not dramatic by nature. I am the person teachers send crying children to because I can get anybody to breathe slower. My daughter Sophie is 6, missing her front tooth, obsessed with sea otters, and the kind of child who still believes every goodbye should include a kiss on the forehead. Daniel used to be that kind of parent too, which is why hearing Vivian tell him to forget her didn't sound like one cruel moment. It sounded like the first sentence of a plan already in motion. And I was about to learn how long that plan had been unfolding behind my back. Before everything split open, Daniel and I had the kind of marriage that looked sturdier from the outside than it felt on the inside. For most of that time, I believed his passivity was gentleness. He hated raised voices, backed away from conflict, and smoothed over tension with jokes, errands, and promises to talk about it later. I mistook delay for peace. Vivian had been part of our marriage from the beginning, though never in a way that made Daniel call it interference. She called it support. She had opinions about my clothes, Sophie's bedtime, my tone, the fact that I kept my maiden name and my job, which she described once at brunch as sweet, if not exactly ambitious. I laughed then because Daniel squeezed my knee under the table like, "Ignore her." But he didn't actually say anything. That was the rhythm of our life with Vivian. She crossed a line, he winced, I swallowed it, and everybody moved on like being offended was less civilized than being offensive. When Sophie was 3 and had pneumonia, I ignored the first real warning sign. She was sleeping on my chest in the hospital recliner, feverish and limp, while I texted updates to family. Daniel was in the hallway calling Vivian because she got anxious when she wasn't informed. When he came back, he looked embarrassed and said, "Mom thinks you scared everybody by saying breathing treatments. Maybe next time keep the details simpler." I remember staring at him. Our child was on oxygen, and somehow I was being corrected on presentation. He apologized in that soft, tired way that made me feel cruel for wanting more. Later, Vivian arrived in cream wool and pearls, kissed Daniel's cheek, and told the nurse, "This family has been under enormous strain. Not Sophie. Not us. Daniel." Even then, I noticed how she framed everything. Daniel as the fragile center, everyone else as weather around him. There were dozens of moments after that. She'd send him condo listings closer to your office, farther from all that chaos. She'd praise Daniel for providing stability, as if I were a babysitter in my own house. I told myself boundaries would only create drama Sophie might feel. Then Daniel repeated one of Vivian's phrases back to me, almost word for word. The first red flags did not look dramatic. That was what made them dangerous. Daniel missed a Wednesday pickup from Sophie's after-school art club and blamed traffic, even though the school was 8 minutes from his office and he had left work early. On Friday, he forgot he'd promised to help her build a cardboard aquarium for class. Sunday morning, he answered his phone on the patio, came back inside with a face like wet paper, and told Sophie, "Not now, Peanut." when she ran up to show him the glitter scale she had glued on a paper fish. He had never been a perfect husband, but he had always been an attentive father. Suddenly, he was present only in outline. He sat on the couch with us but flinched every time his phone buzzed. He'd kiss Sophie's head and then drift away before she finished speaking. Once, when she asked if he could still come to donuts with dads at school, he rubbed the bridge of his nose and said, "We'll see." Sophie's smile stayed on for another second before falling off her face completely. Vivian started appearing more often too, always with a reason that sounded thoughtful. She dropped off soup when Sophie had a cold. She swung by with extra groceries. She offered to take Daniel's dry cleaning because you two seem overwhelmed. Every visit left the house feeling colder, like she had cracked a window somewhere and forgotten to close it. Then a lean notice arrived in our mailbox addressed to a man I didn't know at Vivian's home address. It had been misdelivered with our mail because the street names were similar. I almost tossed it, but Daniel grabbed it too fast. "I'll drop it by her place," he said. "Why are you shaking?" I asked. "I'm not." He was. That night, I found him in the laundry room, staring at his phone. When I asked what was wrong, he said work had gotten weird. But when I asked, "Did something happen with your mom?" he snapped. "Why do you always assume this is about her?" I wanted to believe him. I almost did. Then Sophie mentioned Grandma had picked her up without asking me. The wound opened at Sophie's winter music night. She had one line in the first-grade song and practiced it for 2 weeks, standing on the coffee table with a plastic snowflake wand and demanding applause after every rehearsal. Daniel promised he would leave work early, bring flowers like she's a real star, and sit in the front row so she could spot him. He arrived 12 minutes late, empty-handed, smelling faintly like Vivian's cologne-heavy house because she used the same amber diffuser in every room. I noticed because I had just hugged Sophie backstage and she had whispered, "Daddy came, right?" With the kind of hope that makes your chest ache. "He's here," I told her. "Go shine." After the performance, Sophie searched the crowd for him before she searched for me. Daniel clapped, but distractedly, checking his phone even while she bowed. When she finally ran over, cheeks pink with excitement, he barely looked up. "Did you hear my solo?" she asked. "I heard some of it," he said. "Good job, kiddo." Kiddo. He never called her kiddo. Vivian did. I must have made a face, because Daniel glanced at me and instantly got defensive. "What? You couldn't put the phone away for 5 minutes? We all can't work in a library, Olivia." He said it lightly, but loud enough that 2 parents turned. It was exactly Vivian's brand of insult. Polished enough to be denied, pointed enough to sting. Sophie was still standing between us holding her paper snowflake. Her smile had vanished. In the parking lot, Daniel accused me of making everything a performance. I told him humiliating me in front of our daughter wasn't stress, it was a choice. He said maybe he needed space from the constant pressure in our house, as if he was a guest being inconvenienced. Later, against every instinct I had, I still drove to Vivian's for the family dinner she had insisted on hosting after the concert. I told myself Sophie deserved one normal holiday memory. Instead, while carrying sweet potatoes down Vivian's back hall, I heard her say through the study door, "You keep acting like the child is an anchor you're morally required to drown with." Then Daniel answered in a voice I barely recognized, and I realized I was listening to my marriage being negotiated without me. I did not storm into Vivian's study and throw the door open. I wish I had. Instead, I walked back to the kitchen, set the casserole on the marble island, and stood there so still that Vivian's housekeeper asked if I was feeling faint. At dinner, I watched Daniel like a stranger. He carved turkey for Sophie, smiled when she showed him her snowflake drawing, and even laughed at one of Nina's jokes when she arrived late. If I hadn't heard what I heard, I might have believed I imagined it. But once you hear someone discuss your child like disposable baggage, you never really come back from that. In the car home, I asked him directly, "What did your mother mean when she told you to forget Sophie?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You were listening outside a door? So that's your problem?" "My problem," he said, too calmly, "is that you twist things." I felt something inside me go cold. Then untwist it. He drove another block before saying, "She was talking about legal complications if things get ugly." "What legal complications?" I asked. "Can we not do this in front of Sophie?" Sophie, from the back seat, said softly, "Do what?" That was the beginning of the new atmosphere in our house. Unfinished sentences, doors closing softly, Daniel taking calls outside, Sophie watching our faces like weather reports. Within a week, he was sleeping on the couch because you toss. He canceled Saturday pancakes because he was helping Mom with paperwork. He stopped volunteering for bedtime. When Sophie asked him to read the Otter book, he said, maybe tomorrow, 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, she climbed into my lap and whispered, did I do something rude? I had to bite the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. No, baby, I said. None of this is because of you. But children can feel when love in a room has changed shape. Sophie started asking whether Daddy was mad. She started packing an extra drawing in her backpack, in case he comes. She started waking up with stomachaches on mornings Vivian was supposed to visit. Nina came over after work one Thursday, took one look at my face, and said, this is not random distance. Somebody is coaching him. Then Nina lowered her voice and asked if Daniel had a second phone. Nina heard it before I did, a second vibration. Daniel had left his code on the entry bench while he showered. His regular phone was on the kitchen counter charging. We both heard it buzz there. Then, 2 seconds later, there was another muffled vibration from inside the coat pocket. Nina and I looked at each other. Tell me that's a tile tracker or a work badge, she said. My hands were already shaking as I reached into the pocket and found a slim black phone with no case, no wallpaper, and no name on the lock screen. Just a passcode prompt and a notification banner that vanished before I could read more than, call me before she. I stood there staring at my own reflection in the dead screen. When Daniel came downstairs, hair damp, I held it up. What is this? For 1 second I saw pure panic. Then he arranged his face. Work. Your work issues burner phones now. It's temporary. Who is she? He snatched for the phone. I stepped back. Nina stood up from the table, so fast her chair scraped. Don't, she said. Daniel looked at her like he'd forgotten she existed. This is private. You're married, Nina said. Private is a diary. This is suspicious. He turned to me. Give it back. No. Unlock it. I can't. Can't or won't. He pressed both hands to his face, exhaled, and said, Mom wanted me to have a separate line while I talked to an attorney. My ears rang. About what? Just in case. Just in case of what, Daniel? He wouldn't answer. He only repeated that ugly, vague phrase. Just in case. As if he was buying storm shutters, not quietly preparing for some legal action against the mother of his child. After he left the room, supposedly to get the paperwork, I opened the junk drawer for batteries and found a folded packet clipped beneath our takeout menus. Family court intake forms. A consultation date circled in blue ink. Notes in Vivian's tight handwriting on a sticky note. Unstable tone, school concerns, emotional dependency on child. Emotional dependency on child. I sat down so hard I missed the chair and hit the cabinet instead. Nina took the papers from my hands and said, very carefully, Olivia, she isn't just trying to poison him against you. Then she pointed to one line on the form I hadn't even seen. The line Nina pointed to was under temporary arrangements. Requested parenting schedule pending review. Father primary residence. Child housed with paternal grandmother during business hours. Not even with Daniel. With Vivian. I read it 3 times because my brain refused to accept the words in that order. My daughter had been reduced to a logistics plan on a form I had never seen. Designed by a woman who color-coded her spice drawer and once told Sophie that dolls with messy hair look neglected. Daniel came back empty-handed and stopped when he saw the papers on the table. You went through my things. I laughed, one sharp, unbelieving sound. You were drafting a life where our child lives with your mother. It's not like that. Then what is it like? He sat down slowly, like he was approaching a skittish animal. Mom said I needed to understand my options if you became unreasonable. Unreasonable. His eyes flicked to Nina. He hated witnesses. You've been angry. You're always tired. Sophie is very attached to you. Mom knows how judges see things. Nina actually muttered, oh my God. I asked him the question I had been avoiding. Has Vivian been telling you I'm unstable? He didn't answer directly, which is how I knew yes. He said, she thinks you've been under a lot of strain. And you? Silence. That night, after he took the burner phone and locked himself in the guest room, I started pulling threads. I checked our phone bill and found dozens of short calls from Daniel to Vivian at odd hours, 6:12 a.m., 11:48 p.m., during Sophie's bath time, during my library literacy night, during the exact 40-minute window when he was supposed to be at her school picnic. I went through our shared calendar and matched his canceled family plans to Vivian's drop-by visits. Nina helped me screenshot everything. Then Sophie's school portal showed a strange entry. Authorized pickup contact updated 2 weeks earlier. Updated by whom? Not me. The next morning, I asked the school secretary for the signed authorization card. She hesitated, then handed me a scanned copy from the file. The signature looked like mine at a glance. At a second glance, it was an imitation. And in the emergency contact line, Vivian had added a note in all caps. The note under Vivian's name said, "Family support during maternal episodes." I stood in the school office holding a forged pickup form while a bulletin board behind the secretary advertised the spring book fair and field day volunteers. A mother asking about milk allergies. Meanwhile, I was staring at proof that someone had started building a paper trail to make me look dangerous around my own child. I asked the secretary, as evenly as I could, who had submitted the form. She checked the log and said, "Your husband dropped it off. He said you were overwhelmed and asked him to handle school paperwork for a while." My vision narrowed so hard I had to grip the counter. I took a copy of the form, updated the school instructions in writing, added a password for all pickups, and called Nina from the parking lot. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're sitting down," I said. "I am now." When I read her the note, she was quiet for a full 5 seconds. Then she asked, "Do you still think this is just Vivian whispering in his ear?" No. I knew it was organized. What I didn't know was why Daniel had let it get this far. Was he trying to leave me and preparing for a fight? Was Vivian threatening him? I had the what now. I still didn't have the why, and somehow that made it worse. That afternoon, I called Sophie's pediatrician because Vivian had twice volunteered to take over appointments when Daniel and I were busy. The receptionist sounded confused and said, "Mrs. Warren already requested copies of behavioral notes." Mrs. Warren? Vivian Warren. Grandmother. She said the father wanted documentation because the child had been exposed to maternal volatility. Behavioral notes turned out to mean one ordinary visit where Sophie cried during a vaccine and clung to me afterward. Vivian had tried to obtain records to imply emotional damage. She was gathering pieces. School. Doctor. Pickup authorizations. Language about instability. Daniel's secret attorney consultation. This wasn't a dramatic family spat. It was a campaign. That evening, Daniel came home carrying Sophie's favorite soup and asked if we could all have a calm night. Then Sophie asked Daniel if Grandma had chosen his new bedroom. "Daddy," Sophie asked, looking up at him with trust, "are you moving to Grandma's forever?" The soup container tilted in his hand. "What?" "She told me your room there is prettier than ours." I had not planned to confront him that night. I had planned to keep gathering evidence, keep my face neutral, keep him from warning Vivian. But Sophie's voice was small and hopeful in that awful way children get when they are testing whether the scary thing they sensed might still be fixable. Daniel knelt down fast. "Hey, no, nobody should have said that to you. But Grandma said when houses feel stressed, kids do better if adults make brave choices." That was Vivian's language again. Brave choices and clean starts. I sent Sophie upstairs to put on pajamas and told Daniel we were talking now. He denied knowing Vivian had spoken to Sophie directly. He denied approving any plan to move out. He denied thinking I was dangerous. Yet every denial had a loophole in it, like he had been practicing how to stay technically innocent. "So why the forged school form?" I asked. He swore he had signed something Vivian prepared, but claimed he never read the note she added. He said the attorney meeting was only informational. He said Vivian was spiraling, and he was trying to manage her without making things worse. I stared at him. By helping her make me look unstable? His eyes filled, and for one stupid second that almost softened me. "You don't understand what she does when I push back." That was the first honest thing he had said. After he went to bed, I sat at the dining table with Nina on speaker and built folders on my laptop. Screenshots, call logs, school records, notes with dates and times. I emailed myself copies from a new account Daniel didn't know about. Nina told me to document everything and stop hoping the truth would announce itself politely. The dilemma was brutal. If I confronted Daniel fully, he might confess, or he might run to Vivian and give her time to clean up the trail. If I waited, I was letting Sophie stay in the orbit of people planning around her like she had no mind of her own. At 12:14 a.m., while transferring files, I found one voicemail Daniel had saved but not deleted. It began with Vivian saying my name in the tone people use before a funeral. Vivian's voicemail was timestamped 9:07 p.m., the night of Sophie's music performance. "Daniel," she said, calm as polished glass, "you have delayed long enough. Olivia is attached to chaos because chaos lets her stay central. The child will grieve, yes, but children grieve lost pets and recover. What they do not recover from is being raised inside a woman's instability. If you are serious about protecting Sophie, you need to stop confusing guilt with love." I played it 3 times, each pass stripping another layer off my denial. When I sent the file to Nina, she texted back immediately, "Do not confront alone." 2 days later, Vivian hosted her annual Christmas brunch, the kind of event with white orchids, place cards, and sugared cranberries. I only went because Daniel begged me to keep things civil until he could speak to his mother privately. That phrase alone told me he still thought this could be solved with gentle boundaries. I wore a green sweater Sophie liked and tucked my phone into my bra with the voice memo app running. At first, Vivian was charm itself. She greeted me with air kisses, complimented Sophie's velvet dress, and asked Nina whether her divorce had made her more selective about bitterness. Nina smiled and said, "Actually, it made me more selective about liars." By the time dessert came out, Vivian knew I was not playing my usual role. Then she said, "To the table, some women mistake possessiveness for motherhood. They don't realize how suffocating that is for a child." I set down my fork. "Are we talking about the woman forging school pickup forms?" The room went soundless. Vivian blinked once. "I'm sorry. The note about maternal episodes," I said. "Should I read it aloud, or would that spoil brunch?" For the first time in 9 years, Vivian lost facial control. It lasted maybe half a second, but I saw it. Fear, then calculation. She recovered fast. "Daniel, your wife is clearly spiraling." Then Sophie pulled one folded paper from Vivian's purse. The folded paper in Sophie's hand was a real estate printout for a 2-bedroom condo 15 minutes from Vivian's house. Daniel snatched it too quickly, which told everyone at the table it mattered. Vivian smiled with her teeth. "That is none of a child's business." "No," I said, standing up, "but it is very much mine." Daniel followed me into the front hall while guests pretended not to stare. He kept saying my name like it was a brake pedal. "Olivia, please. Please. Don't do this here." "Here." I laughed. "You mean in the house where your mother is planning where you'll live after she separates you from your daughter?" "She is not separating me from Sophie. Your paperwork literally housed Sophie with Vivian." He dragged both hands through his hair. I was trying to calm her down. "She kept saying if I didn't get ahead of things, you would take Sophie and disappear." I stared at him. "Disappear where? To the library?" There it was again, Vivian's central trick. She took ordinary frustration, privacy, even a woman having her own mind, and translated it into threat. Then Daniel, conditioned all his life to stabilize her, acted first and questioned later. I told him I had copies of the forged form, the pediatric records request, the voicemail, and the attorney paperwork. I told him he was done asking me for patience. We were meeting with a family lawyer and a neutral mediator on Monday because I was not debating reality in kitchens and hallways anymore. I had already booked it that morning after Nina found a women's legal clinic that referred me to someone practical and very unimpressed by polished grandmothers. Vivian stepped into the hall just then, still elegant, still composed enough to fool anyone who wanted to be fooled. "If you're threatening legal action, Olivia, you should remember those things can become public." I looked straight at her. Good. Something flashed in her eyes at that, not outrage. Miscalculation. She had built this whole strategy around me wanting peace more than truth. I leaned closer and said quietly, "Come Monday if you want. But bring every lie you've told, because I have receipts." Then Daniel said 6 words that told me he had never heard the voicemail. Monday's meeting took place in a conference room that smelled like coffee and printer toner. The mediator was a gray-haired woman named Ellen who had the calm face of someone who had heard every version of family disaster and no longer found performance impressive. My attorney, Mara, sat beside me with a yellow legal pad and the kind of silence that made me feel less alone. Nina came too, not as a speaker, but as the person who would keep me standing if my knees gave out. Daniel arrived early. Vivian arrived 2 minutes late in cream wool and a silk scarf, carrying herself like she was attending a board meeting. She greeted Ellen warmly, nodded at Mara, and ignored me until she took her seat. Ellen opened by saying the goal was clarity and interim boundaries involving Sophie. Vivian smiled. Exactly what I've wanted all along. Mara slid the forged school form across the table first, then the pickup log, then the pediatric records request. She spoke plainly, no theatrics. Dates, signatures, notes, access attempts. Daniel's face lost color one document at a time. Vivian tried to interrupt. Those were administrative misunderstandings. Mara placed a transcript beside the form. Then perhaps you can explain the phrase maternal episodes added without consent. Vivian said she was describing concerns. Whose concerns? Mara asked. Vivian glanced at Daniel. The father's. Daniel looked like he'd been slapped. I never said that. It was the first time he contradicted her in a room where she couldn't hush him. Then Mara played the voicemail. Vivian's own voice filled the conference room. The child will grieve, yes, but children grieve lost pets and recover. Daniel put both elbows on the table and covered his mouth. Vivian did what manipulators do when proof corners them. She shifted motives. She said she had only been trying to protect her son from a suffocating marriage. She said Daniel deserved a clean, adult life. Then Mara asked, Mrs. Warren, is this about custody, or about ensuring your son never relocates out of your orbit? For the first time, Vivian's mask slipped all the way. Then Ellen asked whether anyone had told Sophie she might live with Vivian. Daniel answered that question in a broken voice. No, he said. Then, after a pause so painful it felt physical, not by me. Vivian turned toward him with immediate offense. Don't make me your villain because you were too weak to act. Weak. She said it like an accusation and a lifelong diagnosis. That was the moment something settled in Daniel's face. He had spent our entire marriage translating Vivian into something survivable. Concern instead of control. Guidance instead of intrusion. Anxiety instead of manipulation. But now he was hearing her speak with no holiday table, no warm lighting, no room left for euphemism. Mara asked for immediate written boundaries. No direct contact between Vivian and Sophie without my consent. No school or medical access changes, and no independent legal action affecting the child without disclosure. Ellen recommended the same before Vivian could regroup. Vivian laughed once, softly. You are all overreacting to a family misunderstanding. Nina, who had stayed quiet for almost an hour, finally said, You forged a school document and compared a 6-year-old's grief to losing a pet. That isn't a misunderstanding. That's strategy. Daniel signed the temporary boundary agreement before I did. His hand shook so badly the signature barely looked like his. Afterward, he followed me into the parking garage and said, I didn't know she'd gone to the school. I turned on him then. You didn't know because not knowing was easier. Every time she hinted I was too emotional, too attached, too tired, you let her keep talking. You wanted somebody else to manage the choice for you. He cried. I'm not proud to say it barely moved me. Betrayal can make tears look cosmetic. The fallout started immediately. Vivian's access to Sophie's school and pediatric office was revoked in writing. Mara advised me to file a formal incident report about the forged authorization. Daniel moved into a short-term rental and started individual therapy before I asked him to. Some relatives did. Others called secretly to say they had seen Vivian do versions of this for years. At work, I smiled through story hour and then cried in the supply closet. That evening, Sophie asked whether Daddy was in trouble with Grandma. I told Sophie the gentlest truth I could manage. Daddy made some bad choices, I said, kneeling beside her chair, and now the grown-ups are fixing them. She stirred her macaroni without looking up. Did Grandma make the choices too? Children notice everything. Not always accurately, but deeply. Yes, I said. Grandma made some bad choices too. Sophie nodded like she had been waiting for the adults to catch up to what she already felt. 2 weeks later, her stomachaches eased after her pediatrician referred us to a play therapist who kept tiny wooden families in a dollhouse and got Sophie to say, through a rabbit puppet, when people whisper, I think someone is leaving. That sentence almost undid me. Healing was not dramatic. It was paperwork, calendars, and tiny acts of refusal. I changed every school password, limited Daniel's portal access, and told all caregivers there would be no information shared with Vivian. I stopped answering Daniel's late night, can we just talk? texts, and told him communication about Sophie had to stay written unless there was an emergency. For once, structure was mercy. To his credit, Daniel did not fight me on boundaries after the meeting. He started therapy twice a week. He sent apologies that were specific instead of watery. I should have read the form. I should have stopped her after the voicemail. I made protecting my mother's feelings more important than protecting you and Sophie. Those messages mattered, but they did not erase the damage. We moved carefully. Supervised visits at first, then park visits, then short dinners where Sophie could leave anytime she wanted. Daniel showed up consistently. He listened when her therapist suggested he stop making promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Vivian, on the other hand, escalated once she realized access was actually gone. She sent one long email about filial duty, legacy, and a grandmother's rights of love. Mara replied with exactly 3 sentences and a warning not to contact Sophie directly again. I framed my new rule in plain language. No vague hope, no private negotiations, no one gets rewarded for making me doubt my own memory. Then Daniel asked to meet me alone and said something I had not expected to hear. We met on a park bench near Sophie's favorite duck pond during Sophie's school day. Our coffee went lukewarm before either of us finished it. Daniel looked older than he had 3 months earlier, less protected by denial. He said, I rented a place across town, not near my mother. I changed my emergency contact at work. I blocked her for now. My therapist says if I want any chance of being a safe father, I have to learn the difference between guilt, obedience, and love. I believed he had learned the sentence. I did not yet know if he could live it. He didn't ask to come home. He asked what Sophie needed from him next. That was the first question that sounded like fatherhood. I told him she needed consistency, honesty in child-sized language, and 0 adult whispers around her. I told him I needed time, written boundaries, and the freedom to decide later what our marriage even was. He nodded. I'll do that. For now, that is where we are. Not reconciled neatly. Not destroyed cleanly either. We co-parent carefully. We attend some therapy sessions together and many apart. Sophie has started drawing 3 people in our family pictures again, but she also draws strong locks on doors and says that means the right people get to come in. I think that may be the wisest thing anybody has said this year. As for Vivian, she is out of the daily landscape. No school pickups, surprise visits, or private calls with Sophie. The relatives who think I overreacted are free to keep their opinions far away from my child. I am done translating cruelty into manners for other people's comfort. What I learned is ugly and simple. Family is not whoever claims the title most loudly. Love is not pressure with a softer voice. Children absolutely notice when adults hand them secrets and tension. If you are dealing with a toxic in-law and a partner trained to bend around them, document everything. Dates, screenshots, school contacts, voicemail, weird paperwork. Every moment your body says something is off. Do not wait for behavior to become dramatic enough to feel valid.